Today's story was written by Reddit user Frame Late. The following brain scan was provided by the Terran Institute of Pet Assimilation, TIPA, and the Protectorate Xenopet Acquisition and Integration Corporation, PXAIC, and may only be viewed by qualified and permitted individuals for educational purposes of the study of Xenopet neural interface errors and how to prevent them in the future, as well as exceeding the domestication of Xenopets suffering from false sapience. Violating such procedure is a Class C offence by the Protectorate Department of Xenopet Betterment, and can lead to 20 years of imprisonment and a fine of over 100,000 credits. Booting up memory scan, Rocky. Loading and processing firmware data, translating, memories and subconscious simulated. Beginning neural catalogue presentation. My head was spinning and my skull thumped in pain like an entire herd of freshly captured slaves. Recently made pet friends were panicking, celebrating within. Everything was blurry, so blurry, and I just wanted to close my eyes again and waste away. Sensations assaulted me from all angles, some of them good and some of them bad. The warmth of sun-bleached wooden planks in my feathery hide, the smell of different roasting meats, the splashing of individuals in a small body of water very close by, the smell of the salty air and the oppressive white brightness of the daylight passing through my closed eyelids. I had a migraine from my sudden consciousness and perception of the light, causing me to clutch my snout and face with my clawed hands with a guttural moan. My backside hurt as well, in my area. I didn't know why, but something was horribly wrong. Everything was fine. I tried to recall who I was and what was going on, but I couldn't even remember my name. Every time I tried, right when I grasped onto a sliver of something, it was as if it was torn from my grasp and replaced with something else knowingly, like I was being watched and corrected, but within the depths of my own mind. I needed to remember my name. What was my name? Wasn't it Utek? Rocky. I couldn't remember exactly, but Utek, Rocky, was the only name I could recall. It felt wrong. Right. Like something was missing, but I couldn't put my claw on what. Everything was fine, and I couldn't think about it too much. I could feel things that should have been important, things that my consciousness had perceived about a moment ago, slip away from me like I was clenching sand with my claws. Relax, let go of your burden. I inhaled sharply as a strange, warm feeling overtook the back of my skull and muscles became loose and relaxed. Something also felt out of place, like I needed something, but I didn't know what. Everything felt so strange. My head spun, but I was too weak to do anything about it. I felt sick in the same way one would feel when they consume too much caffeine. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my head. "Dad, I think he's awake," I heard a young, shrill voice say, hurting my ears. The touch of the hands made my skin tingle, and the spinning of my head recede as if it grounded me. It felt nice, as if this was wrong. Something was horribly wrong. What normalcy feels like. The hand then began to rub up and down my head and across the ridges along my head, causing me to release a chuff of delight, against my will. Something I hadn't done since I was merely a hatchling. "It sounds like he likes it, David. Keep going, and make sure to scratch his chin. They're sensitive there." The human spawn, David, did what the other humans said and began to scratch under my chin. It felt really good, and I stretched out instinctively. David was thorough and gentle, making sure he scratched every part of me that seemed itchy, and I felt the same warmth in my head from before, but it felt nicer than before, like it was trying to manipulate, encouraging me to relax. "You will learn to love this." I inhaled sharply again, but this time it was almost refreshing, and everything was right in the world. The human's hands felt so good, and the warmth from before spread through my body, melting the knots in my muscles and causing me to close my eyes in comfort. The boy lifted my head up and placed it in his lap before continuing to pet me, my eyelids heavy and my leg lightly kicking. Let them continue. You love this. Oh, that felt nice. What was I thinking about before? The pain in my backside. My legs didn't work too well, and although I could move them gently, my muscles seemed to be fighting against me. What did they do? Do not think. Everything was cold and harsh again, and my thoughts scrambled and my head throbbed. I needed to focus on grounding myself. I couldn't let go. I couldn't let them take my mind from me. Do not think. You are a good boy. I was a good boy? No. Good boy. I was a good boy. Good boys don't think hard. Good boy. I was a good boy. I was a good boy. I was a good boy. I'm scared. Who was I again? You are Rocky. I hissed under my breath as I felt that bad feeling creep up on me again. I didn't like the bad feeling. I was not Rocky. I was Utek. Rocky. My thoughts became jumbled again in a whirlpool of nausea and confusion. Where was I? You are home. It was bright out, and nice and warm as well. The sun was soaking my feather-cloaked skin, and my side felt good against the warm back porch. I heard splashing and laughing in the distance, and the soft clinking of glass against glass. I could smell the salinity in the air, and the air was dense and humid, but in a good way. I had lost all sense of time. Everything had been a blur since I had been taken from that horrid facility, the wretched prison they called the Xenopet Megaplex. There, I was in a padded cell with a few insulting amenities for most of the day, except for the 3 periods a day where they let us out into a small gated courtyard for an hour or so to socialise, as they so condescendingly put it. There, the worst part was the boredom and the mind-bending lack of individuality. I had lost my ability to speak, stand on 2 legs, and even eat normally. I was treated like cattle, but the smiles and cloying gestures hinted that something more sinister was going on, like I was a lesser beast to be kept for their amusement. Now I had traded that particular prison for another, a far worse one. I was at the mercy of a gross violation of my sense of self. Something horrible was growing in my mind, both in the physical and metaphysical sense, and I could feel it working its way through my consciousness like the parasite it was. It silenced me, it stole from me, it gaslit me, and it made me question the very nature of my own individuality and personality. Was I who I thought I was? Everything was so elusive and hard to acknowledge that nothing seemed real between these bouts of semi-consciousness. Don't think, just rest. In an instant, everything changed. My head became fuzzy, like 1,000 voices were whispering to me all at once, but from all directions and inside my head. I didn't hear it per se, but I felt the presence, the oppressive feeling of pure unfocused nonsense. I felt my temporary bout of concentration and resolve become jumbled up into a mess of sporadic confusion. Whatever I was thinking of was gone. Don't think, just relax, let go of your burden. Every part of me became relaxed and limp, my muscles unwinding from their tension and stress. I couldn't resist the feeling, and I stretched out subconsciously with a yawn, my body twitching from the stimuli. I was even sleepier than before, my head spinning once again and my eyelids heavy. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my snout and forced the eye that was facing upwards to open sluggishly. If I had to guess, it was an older human with cinnamon-coloured skin, short-cropped brown hair, a gruff wrinkled face, and chocolate brown eyes. He patted my side gently and gave me a soft rub, the feeling of his rough hands causing my chest to rumble with a satisfied chuff. I loved that it felt good, but I loved it even more that I couldn't bring myself to resist. I felt content. I needed to escape, relax. I needed to find my way home, appreciate my new life. You are already home. No, I couldn't, will not obey. This isn't my home. My home is redacted here. No, yes, I won't, will obey. You can't silence me. Do not resist. Resistance is wrong. Good boys do not resist. Suddenly I felt an intense pressure in my skull, but I didn't know where it came from. I became dizzy and my eyes twitched, a rapidly growing pain intensely forming in my forehead, causing me to wince and clutch my snout in my claws. I couldn't concentrate and I felt the horrible sensation of an invasive presence in my mind once again, working its way through the folds of my brain, strangling my chain of thought. Bile grew in my throat and I felt the sour, stinging feeling of retch in my cheeks. I scrambled to all fours and vomited onto the deck, my hackles and feathers rising as I heaved. The older human from earlier rose from a sleek chair on the deck, his hat on the glass sun table next to him, and his eyes widened in shock. He rushed over to me, and I hissed at him instinctively. I wouldn't let him touch me again. I wouldn't let them control me. Do not attack Ona. In an instant, my world transformed into absolute pain. I felt as if my brain was being deep-fried in a vat of boiling grease, and my eyes were being squeezed. I kept heaving, my stomach doing loops and somersaults around all my other organs, and my heart fluttering like a flock of startled birds. I was weightlessness. I could see the man approach me and push me back down on my side, muttering under his breath. Carol, get Xenopet Emergency Services on the phone. Rocky's having another implant attack. I heard another muffled voice in the background, as well as the sound of the human spawns crying in the pool. For some reason, I felt bad. I'd never felt bad for humans before, but I could feel the guilt in my chest. Had I failed my owners? Breathe, calm, let go. I felt like I was wrestling with my own mind. I wanted to believe that I was not someone's pet, but my body screamed otherwise. Amidst the chaos caused by the wretched implant, I felt the painful sensation of guilt and regret bloom in my chest as I twitched and shuddered on the deck, my mouth frothing. The world was spinning, and suddenly everything erupted into a kaleidoscope of colours. Oh, by the Forbidden One, look at all the pretty colours. I was completely delusional at this point, cackling as I lost it all. If I was going to die here, I'd die happy and completely mad. Soon, everything began to fade away and I slipped into an unconscious state. I woke up to the sound of medical equipment beeping and whirring, the sound of a few hushed human voices, and soft music. I opened my eyes. The room was dark. I didn't feel anywhere near as bad as before, but my head still throbbed. I lifted up my head with a groan and examined the room. It was a dark hospital room, with a window covered in blinds that let very little sunlight in, a few chairs, and of course the hospital bed itself. Mountains of advanced medical equipment were set up on either side of my bed, and a heartbeat monitor beeped slowly, although the speed was growing. Suddenly, I heard the voices again. This time they were legible. Hush, he's awake. We need to make sure he's ready. Huh? Ready for what? Something that irked me was I felt strangely free. I didn't feel the oppressive force of the implant in the back of my skull anymore. How it attempted to crush my will with every waking moment. I still couldn't speak. All that came out were animalistic noises, but I was free from the invasion of my mind for now. Give him some peace, Amelia. He just woke up from an implant attack. You know how traumatic they can be. We have to begin soon. My dissertation for this new technique is due in less than a week, and by law, I need at least one more successful example for it to be deemed acceptable. Besides, he needs to go home soon anyway. My heart sank. I would not go back to that place. I wouldn't let those people keep me like some kind of pet. I was a Rasu, a member of a proud warrior race. I would not be reduced to some animal for the amusement of these humans. Suddenly, I heard footsteps and I tensed. The door creaked open and I spotted a younger human, a male I had never met before, in a lab outfit with his shoes, pants, shirt and overcoat all bleached white and almost glistening. He eyed me warily, as he should, before he sauntered in, a tablet clipped at his side and a strange plastic container in both hands. I growled at him threateningly, extending my talons and raising my feathered hackles. The human paused for a microsecond before continuing forward, caution in his eyes, and right before he was within swiping range, he opened the container, and the most wonderful smell assaulted my nostrils. Meat. I was starving. I don't remember the last time I had eaten anything in particular. The implant had a terrible habit of causing me to go about my day in a hazy blur, entire lengths of time just gone, whitewashed like a sheet of freshly decorated paper dunked in cold water. I knew something was there, or at least that something should have been there, but I mostly spent the days or weeks that I had been captured bobbing like an ocean buoy in a state of frustratingly bleary semi-consciousness. But I'm awake now, and mostly in control. Sure, some things were still missing. Everything was clear now, like my name. What was my name again? My name was Rocky, and now I knew that I needed to eat something, and if putting up with this human for now meant that I could fill my stomach, then I suppose it was an acceptable sacrifice. I salivated expectantly as a human lifted out a large piece of meat with his gloved hand, eyeing me humorously as he wriggled it. It was dark on the outside, but still dripping with blood and juices. Humans had this weird habit of cooking their meats, and although it didn't taste bad at all cooked, nothing beat the feeling and flavour of tearing into raw flesh, the blood and texture still fresh. At least this meat only seemed to be raw and not fully cooked. I snapped up the piece of meat just as he lowered it enough for me to reach it. It was divine. It burst with flavour just as I bit into it, the juices spilling into my mouth. I quickly tore it apart with my strong jaws before snapping up another big piece with a beak-like protrusion at the tip of my snout. All the while, the human gently ran his fingers through my tightly knit feathers and along my knobby, scaly hide. I made my annoyance with his touch clear, but he merely chuckled as if I wasn't an apex predator larger than him, but rather simply a feisty hatchling. I know, just relax. I need to perform a quick test to see if you're healthy before we continue. Continue? Continue with what? Just as the second piece of meat slid down my gullet, I eyed him with hostility and growled, but he quickly slipped something between the scales and feathers on my side and plunged it into my skin. Suddenly, I went rigid. All the air was expelled from my lungs in an instant with a hoarse wheeze. The human merely chuckled and scratched under my chin as if nothing was wrong and my face wasn't frozen in horror. Good, that'll keep you occupied for a few seconds while I just slip this on. He placed a breathing mask over my face and strapped it on before flicking a switch on a machine next to my bed. Then he released the plunger of the strange device on my side, and I suddenly inhaled deeply and deflated like a balloon. I hissed under my breath, but suddenly panic filled my chest. I wasn't breathing just air. A cloyingly sweet-smelling gas coated the inside of my lungs, causing me to become dizzy. Suddenly, I was fully at their mercy again, blinking rapidly and my head spinning. Sorry about that, big guy, but we need to make sure you're passive before we begin the procedure, he said, almost apologetically, although there was a hint of mirth still detectable. Sadly, you have to remain awake for some of it, or I'd simply feed you more and then put you to sleep, but there are some benefits to this inhalant. As if he summoned it with his words alone, my scales suddenly felt very tingly. The human ran his hands across the scales at my side, and I shivered from the feeling. Like pain, but better. Everything felt so warm and strange, like I was floating on water, but also like I was being gently prodded by blades. Then, with panic rising in my chest, I suddenly felt a soft click as something was plunged into the neural port at the back of my skull that the humans had installed into my head when they first captured me and placed me in that wretched facility some time ago. "There you go, all prepped for the doctor. She'll be here to begin the procedure in a bit," he said. "For now, just relax and let the inhalants work their magic." I whined quietly, and he rubbed the side of my head in an attempt to calm me, which only made me more angry. I wasn't someone's pet. I wouldn't be treated like this. I didn't want to go back to where I was before. I didn't want to become that sluggish, broken puppet again. I couldn't. I tried to get up, to will my muscles to move, but I couldn't. My body refused to respond, as if I was paralyzed. But that wasn't right. I could still feel everything, especially the strange, mind-bending sensation the inhalants gave me. Initializing beginning phases of neural alteration preparation. Something else was wrong. I can feel it. Assessing if the neural state is nominal for alterations. I can't let this happen. They're going to do something to me. I won't let them. But nothing happened. I was at their mercy. It was over for good this time. All those battles, all those tragedies and triumphs amongst my kin, only for me to be reduced to this? The plaything for a human? Query, is Dr. Kalangari present to begin neural alterations? The door across the room opened again, and a human woman with light brown skin, chocolate brown eyes, and long locks of black hair stepped in. She was holding a digipad in her hands and swiping up as if she was reading into something before she set it down on the counter across the room and gave me a warm, condescending smile. "Well, how are you doing today, Rocky? I know this predicament you have found yourself in must be very stressful, but I assure you that it is for your own good," she said, almost cheerfully, which sent shivers down my spine. "We're here to lift your burden, and we won't stop until you're capable of living the life of a happy, healthy, and well-behaved pet." I whined under the mask, and the woman rubbed the feathered crest on my forehead. "I know it hurts, but it'll be over soon. It'll be like you, or at least this version of you, never existed. Just relax and close your eyes while we root around your brain and remove all those bad thoughts and silly delusions. I assure you, you won't feel a thing, and you'll feel much better afterward." My heart raced as I began to panic internally, watching in horror as the woman stepped over to the medical console and tapped away for a few seconds before the machinery around me began to whir to life. Identification accepted, booting neurochemical firmware, preparing for selective memory erasure. In an instant, my eyes involuntarily rolled back into my head as I felt the intrusive sensation of my mind being violated. It wasn't painful, but it was horrible all the same. It felt like 1,000 black, slimy leeches were slithering through every crevice of my brain, leaving behind their cold, corruptive filth. The cold sensation seeped further into my brain, behind my eyes and in my ears, enveloping every bit of it until there was nothing left. Relevant memories extracted for tailoring, beginning total memory erasure. Suddenly, things began to slip away. Important memories, like the faces of my parents, the day of my initiation into the Corsair Collective, the face of my life mate, the birth of our hatchlings. I hoped that wherever they were okay. If they never had to face the fate I would face, then maybe there would be some justice in this cruel, twisted galaxy. Maybe they could take the fight to humanity, remind them that they once had been the heroes of the cosmos, fighting against the cruelty of my people and the triarchy at large. Maybe my hatchlings could live normal lives. Memory erasure process at 47%. A single tear rolled down my scaly cheek as everything I once knew, everything that made me, was torn from my mind and rendered null. Every second saw a million memories massacred, leaving the memories the implant had attempted to supplant my old memories with, me playing fetch with my owners, chasing birds on the beach with my owner's grandchildren, swimming in the pool in their backyard as steaks and bratwurst cooked on the grill, relaxing on the back porch and listening to the rasping calls of the katydids during humid summer evenings by the swamps. My psyche was being mutilated piece by piece, reduced to that of an animal, a pet. Memory erasure process at 64%. Soon, I had a hard time telling who I was anymore. I couldn't tell what was real or what wasn't, or what I actually felt. I couldn't even remember my own name anymore. Who was I? Why was I here? What was happening to me? I'm so scared. Someone help me, please. Memory erasure process at 83%. There was nothing left. I felt nothing. I knew nothing. I was floating in a void, with little flashes of light depicting events I didn't recognize. There were people I felt like I was supposed to know, but I didn't know them. A human woman with bright blue eyes and blonde hair. 2 Rasu hatchlings that looked a bit like me, a Rasu female. My chest hurt for a moment, but the feeling quickly subsided. I didn't know any of them. Memory erasure process completed. Implanting tailored memories and personality. Happy birthday, Rocky. You have been unburdened and reborn. In an instant, the confusion of who I was before was replaced with absolute certainty. I knew who I was now, who I always was. I was Rocky, and I was a good boy. I belonged to Mr. and Mrs. Chen. I was their Rasu hound. I loved them. They took care of me and let me play with their grandchildren. I swam in the pool and played outside every day. Life was good. Today was my birthday. That meant it would be a happy day. Mrs. Chen would always come home with a whole duck for me to eat and then take me to the Xenopet Comex for a bath and a spa day. Just like my last birthday, and the birthday before that, and the birthday before that. It was a good life. I was happy. I was always happy. Good boys are always happy. I was Rocky, and I was a good boy. That's all that mattered. To Miguel O'Hara, Chief Medical Representative of the Protectorate Xenopet Acquisition and Integration Corporation, with the best intentions. The over-reliance on neural suppressant firmware programs, along with thought-scrubbing replacement firmware programs and countermeasures towards higher thought and tainted thoughts with a relative active hormonal reward structure, can be incredibly effective when placed into the brain of a more passive xenopets. However, xenopets that come from more difficult backgrounds, such as one in a militant setting, tend to be much more resistant to being reprogrammed by just an implant alone. The Rasu are an excellent example of more tainted xenos that need neurological care of much higher intensity, a level of care that the average xenopet megaplex is ill-equipped to handle due to the current level of technology. I am a firm believer in the idea that thought correction, a hormonal behavioural reinforcement structure, and neural countermeasures can have a place in the proper unburdening process, but we have been chasing the wrong solution for the past century. Many people are under the misconception that the burden these xenos carry is surface level, when in reality the corruption runs far deeper. It's like a weed with deep roots. To kill the weed permanently, you must rip out the roots, and not just the surface plant. If you do not eliminate the source of the problem, it may just return, and worse still, the mind may adapt to the standard unburdening process, allowing the xenopets to fall victim to those degenerate zealots who seek to pretend xenopets possess even the capacity for true sentience. We, as Terrans, should be united in this cause of unburdening the galaxy. But I digress. The implant should be there to reinforce good behaviour and stigmatise bad behaviour, not completely reprogram the pet. To fully stamp out any potential for a relapse, we must remove the core issue that has the most potential to cause problems, their memories. The Rasu are an excellent example. We are in the advanced testing stages of a new method that may revolutionise how we process and integrate xenopets into our society. By removing or modifying any and all problematic memories, we can completely remove the risk of relapse and make it nearly impossible for those misguided degenerate rebels to bring to the surface problematic ideas and memories that could reawaken a sense of false sentience. It is the perfect final solution to our overarching goal, for humanity to unburden the galaxy, one happy pet at a time. We hope to secure more funding from PXAIC that will greatly assist us in the expansion of the possibilities that this breakthrough technique can provide. More than just using it on board-approved fringe cases. Think about the many xenopets we can unburden, and how they'll live happy and ignorant lives with their human owners. This could be a game-changer, Representative, and I implore you to bring it before the board with the best of intentions. Best regards, Dr. Emilia Kalangari, Head Researcher of the Epsilon Eridani Institute's Behavioural Neurology and Neurochemistry Division, B&ND.